January 15th, 1947. Los Angeles, California. 7 o'clock in the morning. A woman named Betty Bersinger is walking with her young daughter through a quiet residential neighborhood in Lemert Park. It is a cold morning, the kind of morning where nothing is supposed to happen. A woman notices something in a vacant lot across the street. A shape, pale, still, lying in the grass. Her first thought is that someone has dumped a store mannequin. She looks closer. It is not a mannequin. It is a young woman, 22 years old. Her body has been cut completely in half at the waist, drained entirely of blood, washed clean, and placed here, posed with the precision that investigators said they had never seen before and would never forget. Her name was Elizabeth Short. She had come to Los Angeles from Massachusetts with a dream. She wanted to be in the movies. She was never in a single film. But she became the most famous woman in Hollywood history because of the way she died. This is the story of the Black Dahlia, the most disturbing unsolved murder in American history. And the closer you look, the darker it gets. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts, the third of 5 daughters. Her father disappeared when she was 6 years old, staged his own death to escape his debts. Her mother raised 5 girls alone through the Great Depression. Elizabeth grew up to be striking. Dark hair, dark eyes, fair skin, the kind of beauty that people noticed immediately. She was also restless, dreamy. She told people she was going to be a movie star. In 1943, she left New England and moved to California. The Hollywood she found was not the Hollywood she had imagined. She worked as a waitress, as a cashier. She moved between rooming houses and borrowed couches. She dated widely, sometimes multiple men at once, looking for security, for connection, for someone to anchor her drifting life. In 1944, she fell in love with a military pilot named Major Matthew Gordon. He was killed in a plane crash in August 1945 before they could marry. Elizabeth never quite recovered. She kept moving. San Diego, Chicago, Miami, back to Los Angeles. She was charming and warm and funny with people who knew her, but she was also lost, looking for something she could never quite name. By January 1947, she had been in Los Angeles for 6 months. She was 22 years old. She had no acting credits, no steady income, no permanent address. And nobody, not one person, knew where she had been for the 7 days before her body was found. The last confirmed sighting of Elizabeth Short alive was January 9, 1947. She was dropped off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles by a man named Robert Manley. She was supposed to meet her sister in the lobby. Witnesses saw her in the lobby. Then they saw her walk out the front door. And then nothing. For 6 days, Elizabeth Short vanished. No credit card transactions, no verified sightings, no phone calls, no witnesses who could place her anywhere with certainty. When investigators later tried to trace her movements, they hit wall after wall. She had been known to use false names, to move without telling anyone, to disappear for days at a time. But this disappearance was different. When Betty Bersinger found her body on January 15, 1947, the coroner confirmed she had been dead for less than 24 hours, which means Elizabeth Short was alive somewhere in Los Angeles for most of those missing 6 days. somewhere, with someone. Someone who eventually killed her, tortured her, drained her blood, cut her in half, and then cleaned her body and drove it across the city in the early morning hours to leave it in a vacant lot like an exhibition. Where was she for those 6 days? That question has never been answered. To this day, nobody knows. The LAPD arrived at the vacant lot on Norton Avenue within minutes of Betty Bersinger's call. What they found would stay with the officers on scene for the rest of their lives. Elizabeth Short's body had been severed completely at the waist, cut between the second and third lumbar vertebrae with the precision of a surgeon. Both halves had been completely drained of blood. The body was cleaned, washed, inside and out, then transported here and positioned with deliberate care. Arms raised above the head, legs apart, the two halves placed with a gap of about 30 centimeters between them. The killer had also cut 3-inch gashes from both corners of her mouth, extending her smile into something that investigators described as grotesque. Rope marks on her wrists and ankles showed she had been bound for an extended period. The autopsy confirmed she had been tortured before she died. Her cause of death was listed as cerebral hemorrhage and shock from blows to the head. And then the detail that truly disturbed investigators above everything else. There was not a single drop of blood at the scene. In the entire vacant lot, on the grass, on the pavement, on the body itself, not one drop of blood, which meant Elizabeth Short was killed somewhere else entirely, cleaned, packed, and delivered here like a message. The killer wanted her to be found. He had chosen this location, just feet from the sidewalk, because he knew she would be seen. He was not hiding what he had done. He was displaying it. 9 days after Elizabeth Short's body was found, a package arrived at the Los Angeles Examiner. Inside, Elizabeth Short's birth certificate, her address book, some photographs, a claim check for a suitcase at a local bus station, and a note, assembled from cut and pasted newspaper letters. It read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." The letter that followed said, "I will give up in Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." The LAPD rushed to the bus station to claim the suitcase Elizabeth had left there. Inside, clothing, more personal items, a business card, and something that suggested she had known the person who sent that package. Because the items sent to the newspaper, her birth certificate, her photos, were not things a stranger could easily obtain. This was someone who had been close to her, someone she had trusted. The LAPD fingerprinted the package, analyzed the handwriting on the note, traced the postmark, interviewed every postal worker on the route. Nothing. Not a single usable lead. Whoever sent that package knew exactly how to send it without being found.
The investigation into the Black Dahlia murder became the largest in LAPD history. At its peak, 750 investigators from the LAPD and other departments were assigned to the case. Over 150 formal suspects were investigated. More than 60 people confessed. 60 people walked into a police station and claimed to have killed Elizabeth Short. Every single one of them was eventually cleared. The case was front-page news for 35 consecutive days. Journalists were so intertwined with the investigation that at one point they were inside the LAPD building, freely answering the tip line telephones, intercepting information intended for detectives, and withholding leads they wanted to develop as exclusive stories. The investigation was contaminated from the beginning. Evidence was compromised. Witnesses were media coached. The crime scene had been overrun by reporters before investigators could secure it. By the end of 1947, the case had stalled completely. By 1949, a Los Angeles grand jury was convened specifically to investigate why the LAPD had failed to solve it. The grand jury found evidence of significant institutional failure, but no charges were ever filed against officers or officials. The Black Dahlia case was quietly shelved, and it stayed that way for decades, until a retired LAPD detective decided to investigate his own father. Dr. George Hodel was not an ordinary man. He was a physician, brilliant by all accounts, a child prodigy who entered Caltech at 15 and graduated medical school with honors. He moved in the highest circles of Los Angeles society, socializing with artists, intellectuals, and entertainers. He was charming, cultured, and deeply respected. He was also, according to people who knew him well, completely without conscience. In the late 1940s, George Hodel was already under LAPD surveillance. He had been accused of sexually abusing his own daughter, Tamar. His secretary, Ruth Spalding, had died under suspicious circumstances that were ruled an accidental overdose. The LAPD believed he had murdered her to prevent her from testifying against him. In 1950, the LAPD secretly wiretapped George Hodel's home. They recorded hundreds of hours of his conversations. Most of it was mundane. But then, on one recording, George Hodel said this: "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out." The LAPD had him on tape appearing to confess to the Black Dahlia murder. George Hodel was never charged. He left the United States in 1950 and moved to Asia. He spent the rest of his life in the Philippines and then in San Francisco. He died in 1999. And nobody outside the LAPD knew about that tape for decades. Steve Hodel spent 20 years as an LAPD detective. He was good at his job. He believed in evidence. He believed in procedure. After his father's death in 1999, he found a photograph in his father's belongings. A photograph of a dark-haired young woman. He thought it looked like Elizabeth Short. He told himself he was wrong, that it was a coincidence, and then he started looking anyway. What he found destroyed every assumption he had made about his own life. His father had treated patients with venereal disease at a clinic in the 1940s. Elizabeth Short had been a patient at a clinic matching that description. Handwriting experts hired by Steve Hodel compared his father's known handwriting to the notes the killer had sent to newspapers. Multiple experts concluded the handwriting matched. His father's medical background explained the surgical precision of the bisection,
His father had access to the chemicals that would have been required to drain a body of blood. His house, the Franklin house in Los Feliz, had a basement large enough that it could have been used as a kill room. And in 2004, previously sealed Los Angeles District Attorney files were discovered in a vault. They named George Hodel as the primary suspect in the Black Dahlia murder. He had been the primary suspect all along. The LAPD knew, the DA knew, and nobody had charged him. Why? Steve Hodel's theory is as disturbing as the murder itself. Post-war Los Angeles was a city run by powerful men who protected each other. The LAPD of the 1940s was deeply corrupt, routinely suppressing evidence, protecting wealthy suspects, and burying cases that threatened people with influence. But George Hodel was connected, deeply, dangerously connected. He knew politicians, newspaper editors, entertainment industry figures, and organized crime figures. He moved in circles where favors were traded and problems were made to disappear. Steve Hodel believes the LAPD identified his father as the primary suspect early in the investigation and then made a decision not to pursue it, because pursuing it would have meant pulling on threads connected to people far more powerful than one physician. The DA files discovered in 2004 support this conclusion. They show that investigators had built a significant case against George Hodel, and then the case stopped moving. George Hodel had also been investigated in connection with other murders in Los Angeles during the same period. Between 1943 and 1949, over a dozen young women were found murdered in Los Angeles in circumstances similar to Elizabeth Short's. None of those cases were ever solved either. Steve Hodel believes his father was responsible for multiple murders. He believes the LAPD knew and looked away. He has spent the rest of his life trying to prove it. The LAPD has never officially named George Hodel as the Black Dahlia killer. The case remains officially unsolved. Elizabeth Short has not been forgotten. Elizabeth Short came to Los Angeles with nothing but hope. She found a city that chewed through dreamers and kept moving. She found a world that valued her appearance above everything else about her. And she found a killer who saw her as something to be displayed rather than mourned. "78 years later, no one has been convicted of her murder. The files exist. The wiretap recording exists. The handwriting analysis exists. The DA's suspect documents exist." George Hodel died in 1999. He was never charged. He never answered for what the evidence strongly suggests he did. There is no memorial on Norton Avenue. No marker in the vacant lot where Betty Bersinger found her that cold January morning. The city built over that lot decades ago. But Elizabeth Short has not been forgotten. Because what happened to her matters. Not because of the horror of it, but because she was a person. A young woman from Massachusetts who wanted something better, who deserved better, and who never got it. This has been the Cold Files. The case stays open. If this case kept you watching, hit like and subscribe to the Cold Files. The file never closes. Turn on notifications so you never miss a case.